Okay, here we are. Hi, I'm Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where my hair is not really behaving because it's weirdly humid, not humid here. So, anyways, so 16 millimeter films is what we watch. We have a bunch of them, and you guys show up and watch them and comment on them. Seems to be a pretty good situation. And I very much enjoy and appreciate the fact that you like to watch what I show. Even though it might be about wet mounting paper materials, which is what we showed yesterday. But, I like to try to get information that's locked away in these films out to you. And this one is painting with calligraphy. Enjoy.
Let me take you back into the past, a long way back. In the beginning, our planet was a cloud of swirling atoms. May we never reduce it to that again. For an eternity of time, it sped flaming through space until a crust formed. Then it gradually cooled, became solid, and was surrounded by atmosphere. Mud and water collected on its surface. Finally, life could exist. There were steaming forests on land and crustaceans and fish in the sea. Giant lizards came out of the swamps, and lastly there were birds and mammals. Man became the master race. His earliest shelter was probably in caves. On their walls we find today pictures like that of the Stone Age bison in France, painted perhaps 30,000 years ago. Some prehistoric men lived in forests and may have had a sign language akin to this one of more recent times. A Capistrano Indian shows us the gestures for horse, hunger, the empty bowl, and bird. If a message was to be sent, one could draw pictures. Early languages developed picture writing, such as these hieroglyphics from Egypt. They used significant lines, or calligraphy, which is defined as beautiful writing. On this continent, we have not only Mexico's calendar stone, but other landmarks of civilization, like this 150-room cliff dwelling at Mesa Verde in Colorado. While we have no record of the writing of its builders, we can show you a report of a turkey hunt. This rubbing was taken by Agnes Sims from a petroglyph in San Cristobal Pueblo, New Mexico. Here is the Chinese for girl and for mother. This one is boy. Take girl, add boy, and you have the Chinese word for good. Notice the similarity between the characters for big, reverence, heaven, and husband. These are the symbols for tree and for forest. Tree Nursery by Paul Clay is in the Phillips Collection in Washington, one of the country's most stimulating and varied art galleries. Here, the Chinese word for tree is used spontaneously by Clay because to him, too, it says trees. Pine trees, a triangular motif, grass, which is like the Roman numeral 12, and bushes. In my painting of the bridge, the color areas are so vague that one needs to be reminded that they represent grass, stone arches, or automobiles. George Post of San Francisco chose this old 49ers hotel as a study in calligraphy. He has washed in the major areas and is ready to add significant detail. George is left-handed and often uses an old sable brush worn to a dull point. This serves equally well for the shingles, or loaded with Hooker's green, a little yellow ochre and black, for the tree area. These shapes are not reproductions of any particular species, but mere foliage masses to indicate the structure of the trees. How empty the picture looked before it was enlivened by calligraphy. This is his painting of Point Richmond, north of Berkeley, and his scene from the Mother Lode country, California. While the color areas in Raoul Dufy's Chateau and Horses were probably chosen for harmony, not realism, these are identified as horses, trees, and people by calligraphy or brushstrokes. John Marin defines the pebbled beach in his Quoddy Head as authentically down Main Way, and designates other areas of the paper as rocks, surf, or sky. The strokes in my still life of basket and lamp were for the purpose of adorning various surfaces rather than describing them. Now we are looking at paintings by Paul Travis of Cleveland. Let us watch him at work, since he is one of our most inventive calligraphers. These colors that he's pouring into the wet paper are in no way representational, but chosen to express a mood or an idea. He, by the way, dribbled on paint long before the founders of the late teapot cult. As I watch him combine pigment and ink, the raw, contrasting colors already suggest savagery and the ruthless combat for survival in the jungle. But when I ask him how he expects to find a tiger in that mess, he says it might not turn out to be a tiger, and that sometimes a paper is discarded, as indeed this one will be later. A simple plate for a palette and a variety of brushes are his tools. Before he allows this new paper to dry, he adds spots of casein or gouache. The result satisfies him, and he starts working with a small brush. Since I have already seen the finished picture, I should tell you that the straight line on the left will be the back of a zebu bull's neck. In painting this kind of a picture, Mr. Travis says, the artist should feel opposing forces, good and evil, light and dark, strength and weakness, the yang and the yin. Travis is using an S-curve repeatedly, thus uniting the various forms in the picture. He likes to juxtapose fine calligraphic lines with coarse ones for contrast, the tiger's head and mouth, and more S-curves. With a fingerprint, he glazes over the eyes with purple, the color symbolizing death, as the tiger sinks his teeth into the bull's neck. This close-up of the bull's face, full of bewilderment and suffering, is part of the drama of survival. Rather than continue to follow the artist's hand as he utilizes these rhythmic lines of dark and light, we now move to the almost completed painting. Travis's work is so varied that I should show you several other examples. Each is a conception unlike the others, and each is done with varied techniques and approaches. In this final study, the same feeling ripples the muscles under the tiger's skin and imparts a glare of hate to his yellow eyes. As a contrast, let us turn to a picture by a friend of Travis's and bask in the quiet of Charles Birchfield's Sultry Afternoon. He too uses calligraphy, but in soft colors and with a tenderness suited to the feeling of the day. Above the stirring of leaves and grass, a locust buzzes lazily. Now for a quite different emotion, let us enjoy the rococo, red plush, and opulent decor of Dufy's The Opera, Paris. Across the pages of history, from prehistoric times until now, we've seen men communicate information and express a wide variety of thoughts and emotions by means of painting with calligraphy.
Was an interesting turn from the other Elliot O'Hara films that we've shown, where Elliot O'Hara is actually showing a technique. This was like a weird history lesson that started off before the existence of man, and then it somehow shows up at some point, and then it becomes an art history lesson. But wow, that was not what I was expecting. Well, there you go. All right, so next film. This is from Centron, and this is industrial arts. Maybe some of you remember what industrial arts was back in the day in high school. There were industrial arts high schools, actually, or technical schools that were set up to teach basically shop. So teach wood shop, teach machining, teach auto repair, like basically trade schools that would teach you stuff. And some of them still exist in bigger cities, but man, it seems like that is something that should be going on to this day. I think community colleges have kind of taken that on a little bit, but man, shop. So this is a film that was made in shop, for shop, and it's not a safety film, I'm sorry, but this is wood finishing. Enjoy.
Suppose you have just completed this piece of work. You're now faced with the question of how is it to be finished? Do you want an opaque finish? Or a clear, natural finish? Should it be darker than it is? Will it be subjected to rough usage or excessive moisture? Or perhaps you want it to appear as a more expensive material. There are wood finishes that can meet any or several of these requirements. But if the finish is not selected wisely, all the hours that have gone into your project will have been wasted, and the potential beauty of a fine piece of craftsmanship will not have been realized. However, before any finish can be applied, you must have a smooth surface on which to work. To smooth a piece of wood, select an abrasive that is just finer than the coarsest scratches in the wood. Too fine an abrasive will do the job, but will take much longer. The abrasive you should use will take out the coarse scratches in the material and leave finer scratches. The next finer abrasive you use will take out the scratches left by the preceding abrasive and leave still finer scratches. And so on until the piece is as smooth as you desire. Dents may be raised by repeatedly applying a cloth soaked in hot water until the dent is raised slightly above the surrounding surface. Then it may be sanded down flush. If there are small cracks called checks or nail holes, they may be filled with stick shellac or wood repair that matches the color of the wood. Any such repairs must be sanded smooth. All sanding should be done with the grain. This process is easier if the sandpaper is wrapped around the block. Power sanders, such as this one, are fast and efficient, but rotary sanders tend to leave scratches across the grain. The corner where a flat surface meets an edge is called an eris. The razor edge should be taken off. However, avoid excessive or uneven rounding of the erises. Curved edges should be sanded only with a forward motion with the grain. After sanding, clean the work first with a brush and then with a clean cloth, and it is ready for the finish. The simplest finish to apply is paint, and if the wood is not attractive, or if you want to match other furniture or cover it for some other reason, paint is a very effective way of doing so, and paint can be obtained in any color. However, before painting, cover knots and pitchy places with shellac. Or if you are using a pitchy wood such as pine, it should be given a first coat of shellac. This seals the pitch in so it will not penetrate and discolor the paint. If you are using an open-grained wood such as fir, you may want to apply a first coat of some commercial sealer. Whatever material is used, the first coat will act as a primer and will raise the grain, so you need to sand this coat with very fine sandpaper. The object should get 3 coats of paint, with each coat getting progressively thicker. Be sure that each coat is thoroughly dry before applying the next. If you like the grain pattern in your wood, there are a variety of finishes you can use to show yet protect this pattern. The piece can be bleached with one of the commercial bleaches on the market to lighten it. However, these are strong chemicals and should be handled with care. If you want the wood to be darker, or if you want a color change, there are wood stains. There are 3 types of stain in common use: oil stain, water stain, and spirit stain. Any of these will bring out the grain and enrich the color, or change the appearance of an inexpensive wood such as red gum to that of a more expensive wood such as walnut. Oil stains, while they do not penetrate the wood deeply and have a tendency to fade, are the easiest to apply, and they come in a variety of colors. Water stains penetrate the wood deeply. They are transparent, inexpensive, and give best results when used on hardwood. However, they raise the grain, which makes sanding necessary between coats. Spirit stains are pigments dissolved in alcohol. They penetrate more deeply than other stains, but will fade on long exposure to light. Spirit stains are most commonly used in refinishing old furniture, since they will penetrate a surface where some other finish has previously been used. All stains are applied in much the same way. Begin by testing the stain on a scrap of the same wood to be sure you will get the color you want. For best results, apply 2 coats. This test should be run with all finishing materials. Since end grain takes stain more rapidly than side grain, it should be treated with a dilute solution of the stain, or, in the case of oil stain, with a coat of linseed oil. This prevents the end grain from becoming too dark. Stain the undersurfaces and lower parts first. Brush or wipe the stain on evenly and rapidly, going with the grain. Brush toward the edges to avoid runs. If runs occur, brush them out immediately. Excess water stain can be mopped up with a brush, but if the coat is smooth, it should be allowed to dry into the wood. If you are using oil stain, wipe the surface with a clean cloth before drying begins. This will help produce an even shade. If the color is still too light, apply another coat. Allow sufficient drying time before a filler or sealer is applied. In the case of oil stain, at least 24 hours. If you are using a close-grained wood, such as pine, sycamore, maple, or locust, it may be filled and sealed with a liquid agent such as shellac. If you are using an open-grained wood, such as mahogany, white oak, or walnut, a paste filler should be used. The paste filler should be colored to match the wood or stain and should be thoroughly stirred and thinned with benzene or a thinner recommended by the manufacturer to the consistency of a thick paste. The filler is brushed on with the grain and let stand until the gloss disappears. This requires from 4 to 10 minutes. The filler surface is now rubbed in a circular motion to pack the filler into the pores. The excess is then removed by rubbing across the grain with a rag. Streaks may then be removed by rubbing lightly with the grain. After you have attained the proper color and filled and sealed the wood with a coat of sealer or thin shellac, it is time to select your final finishing material. Shellac, varnish, and lacquer are the materials most commonly used. White shellac is best for general use. It sets quickly and becomes quite hard when dry. However, it becomes soft and turns white when exposed to excessive moisture or heat. Shellac can be applied over stained or natural wood. It is used as a liquid filler or sealing coat, or it can be used alone, building up a smooth, protective finish with several coats. After cleaning the object thoroughly, prepare the first coat of shellac, made up of 1 part alcohol and 1 part shellac. Lay the shellac on in narrow strips with a good quality varnish brush about 1½ inches wide. Use long, fast, even strokes working toward the irises. If any spots seem to have been missed, leave them to be covered by the next coat. After at least 8 hours drying, rub the project down lightly with very fine sandpaper and steel wool. Use a small piece held lightly with the fingertips and work only a small area at a time. Clean the project thoroughly and apply the second and third coats in the same manner as the first, using progressively thicker shellac. For a fine finish, use a felt pad and rub the final coat with pumice stone and rubbing oil. And then with rotten stone and rubbing oil, always rubbing with the grain. Lacquer dries quickly and produces a hard surface and a fine finish that is not affected by changes in temperature. It is comparable to good spar varnish when exposed to moisture. In most cases, it is wise to apply 1 or 2 coats of lacquer sealer before lacquer is applied, because the ingredients in some lacquers may dissolve shellac, paint, and similar materials used as undercoats. Lacquer may be obtained clear or in a variety of colors. Lacquer may be either sprayed or brushed on. However, spraying type lacquer is not the same as brushing type lacquer, and the two should not be interchanged. Be sure you have the correct one. Brushing type lacquer should be applied over a smooth coat of lacquer sealer with a good quality camel's hair or fitch hair brush. Flow on the brushing type lacquer with the brush and do not brush over the same place more than once. Lacquer must be applied as rapidly as possible and the brush strokes finished out to the irises. After 3 or 4 hours for drying, sand the rough spots lightly with very fine sandpaper, and you're ready for the second coat. 2 coats are usually sufficient when applied over a surface that has been sealed. Sand the final coat lightly with very fine waterproof sandpaper and rubbing oil. For a smooth velvet finish, rub and polish the final coat with rotten stone and oil. Flat varnish dries in about 4 hours. It acts as a preservative and retains the beauty of natural wood. It produces a soft, dull finish without rubbing and is used on interior woodwork and furniture. In applying varnish, great pains must be taken to avoid dust. The brush must be perfectly clean. Buy small cans of varnish and use a new one for each operation if possible, as the scum will cause a rough surface. Do not apply varnish in the shop, but find a more dust-free room, and never lay the brush down anywhere during the operation. Allow 20 hours for drying and sand with a small piece of very fine sandpaper. Do not do this sanding in the finishing room. Apply the second and third coats as you did the first, sanding between each coat. Use a new can for the last coat and a new brush if possible. Rub-on finishes are relatively new. They can be applied over natural or stained wood. They are fast drying and have an oil or wax base. The rub-on finish must be applied on a clean surface. But unlike resin-based finishes, while this finish is wet, it is relatively free from the ill effects of dust. This dust-free quality makes it possible to rub it on in a busy shop and still get a fine finish. And finally, to add polish and protection to any project, apply a coat or two of paste wax. In brief, then, be sure that your project is ready before you apply any finish. Decide what you want in colors and textures, and experiment to be sure that you can produce them. For safety's sake, be sure to put all oily rags in a closed metal container. Take pains with every step of the finishing process so you know that everything will be just the way you want it. Wood finishing is difficult, but if you handle these finishing materials in a skilled manner, they will work for you and the resulting product will be worthy of a true craftsman.
So I feel like I should have taken shop instead of French. I should have. They had like a 3-year electronics program. Man, I could totally use that information now. I cannot solder to save my life, and there's so many things here at AV Geeks that are electronics, old VCRs, old audio decks. I'd love to be able to diagnose and repair those. That's just, and let me just tell you as a freebie, if that's something you know, like get all the manuals for all the video decks and all the audio decks and learn how to repair those things, and then advertise to folks like myself, audiovisual archivists who are trying to get equipment that can be refurbished or can be repaired, because there's a lot of it. And there's a lot of material that hasn't been digitized. So there's my PSA. So behind me, I have a film scanner that is solid state. It did not... I thought for sure in getting this that when I had a problem, which this is the second one I have. The first one that I had was having some weird problem where it was basically not initializing. And I was like, oh, well, why don't you tell me send me a card and I can pull out the motherboard and put in a new motherboard. I can do that stuff pretty easily. And they're like, no, you have to ship it back to us. I was like, what? Because this is not a light thing. This is I think it's 200 pounds, 150 pounds, and it comes in its own shipping case. So I basically had to ship it back, and they're like, yeah, it's a problem. We're gonna ship you a new one. So I was like, what? I mean, couldn't you just send me the cards to fix it? But oh well. Anyways, so behind me, film scanner, public service announcement about salt. It is surprisingly pro salt. This is by the Salt Institute. So this is a film called Salt: Essence of Life. It came out in 1982, and you can imagine why it came out, because of all the negative stuff that was coming out about salt and about blood pressure. And I'm actually going to be recording a show with Joe Pickett at Found Footage Festival, and we're going to talk about salt and our blood pressure. Because it turns out, like, sitting on your butt watching films and video it's not conducive to positive, healthy heart behavior. And so I think we're going to talk about that. But in kind of researching what we were going to show, I found this film. I was like, wow, this is awesome. All right. So anyways, here's Salt: Essence of Life. Enjoy.
There are places in this world, remote, isolated places, where the passage of years has had little impact, where certain activities have gone on practically unaltered for centuries beyond memory. There are places in this world where men labor under a merciless sun, tearing a life-giving substance from a reluctant, unforgiving earth. The substance they sweat and strain after is one their ancestors sought in much the same way. There are places in this world where desert caravans still move slowly, gracefully, over the trails established in antiquity, transporting what caravans have always transported. What they carried was one of the first items of commerce. Often it was traded for gold. Great cities grew up along its trade routes. Battles have been fought over it. It has been used for money, and in some places, it was nearly as precious as gold. Yet, it is not rare. Rather, it is as abundant as the sea around us. Salt. What is the mystery of this unique mineral? What magic does it possess that it has had such a profound and lasting impact on human history? The answers are everywhere, but we begin here with the oceans from which in some dim, shrouded past, life first emerged. Majestic, powerful, surging, constantly restless, they alone are the source, the motherlode for every grain of salt found on Earth. Once the seas covered vast areas of land, but with time they receded to their present boundaries. Avery Island, Louisiana. Unspoiled, seemingly untouched by time. A sanctuary for wildlife. It is one of the places where the oceans left behind a fantastic legacy. A testimony to their primeval movements, an almost inexhaustible supply of salt. 1,000 feet beneath this tranquil beauty, there throbs a half-lit subterranean world, the world of the deep mine, where men and machines draw salt from the bowels of the earth. digging out long buried deposits left behind eons after the ocean's waters evaporated into history. Once strong men worked slowly, laboring with picks and shovels. Today, the precise use of explosives has made these hand tools obsolete and created huge underground galleries carved out of salt. And the machines, looking very much like children's toys, begin the job of collecting it here. Thousands of tons of rock salt a day. Today, there are still places where salt is harvested as it was over 3,500 years ago. Sun and wind evaporate seawater trapped in shallow ponds, leaving behind a residue of salt. Salt to be gathered either by strong men or by the awesome products of 20th century technology. San Francisco Bay between September and December. Where once an Indian tribe took salt from mudflats and marshes, specially designed harvesters tear up a 6-inch crust of salt. That crust is the result of a long process in which seawater is moved from pond to pond, its level of salinity increasing as evaporation takes place. It may take 5 years for the salt to crystallize, and then, like any other crop, it is ready to be harvested. Harvested at the astounding rate of 20,000 tons a day. By every standard, this is an enormous operation. An operation whose production facilities spread out over 26,000 acres. The work goes on 24 hours a day. The salt is placed into miniature railroad cars, which carry it to a wash house. There, using saturated brine, seawater, and fresh water, the salt is cleaned and impurities removed. Clearly, modern technology is at work here, but solar evaporation remains essentially a natural process, relying on maximum sunshine, minimum rain, and ample wind to produce mountains of salt. Mountains of pure salt that can rise at the peak of the harvest 100 feet into the air. If solar evaporation needs sunlight and deep mining needs explosives, brine wells need only fresh water. A pipe is driven into the salt deposit far below the surface, water pumped down to dissolve the salt, and the dissolved salt is brought back to the surface in the form of brine. Then at the surface, the process of transforming that brine to salt begins. It's called the vacuum pan method. Developed in the 1880s, it all takes place within a series of huge cone-shaped evaporators, or pans, into which the brine is forced, heated until crystals form, then dried until all that remains is salt. No matter where salt comes from or how it is obtained, quality control never ceases. Standards are high and strict for each step in the manufacturing process. Until those standards are met, then and only then is it ready to be packaged. The flow never stops. A pure white stream continually being loaded into waiting trucks, trains, and barges. Moving salt from one place to another has always preoccupied man. Early traders used rivers. Caravans carried it across deserts and over mountains. One of the oldest Roman highways, the Via Salaria, the Salt Road, was built expressly to carry salt to Rome from works along the Mediterranean Sea. Time has changed only technique. All over the United States and Canada, salt is moved efficiently, quickly, daily, from where it is produced and processed to where it is needed. Needed to play a vital role in a surprising, a remarkable number of jobs, and to touch us all in one way or another. In the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, near the tiny town of West Cliff, Colorado, Ralph Austin runs a large cattle ranch. It's a way of life he's inherited from his forebears. And beef cattle are what his business is all about. The stronger, healthier, and larger they are, the more they will fetch at auction. From long experience, Ralph Austin knows precisely what salt can do for his cattle.
Salt is a very important mineral to the livestock market. I mean, in all types of livestock. It's a mineral that they don't get unless you supplement feed them. And particularly in this range country, where the ground is so dry, it's not saline or anything, so they can't get it out of grasses and stuff. And I like to use iodized salt. It holds down on foot rot, diphtheria, and some forms of kertitis, which is pink eye.
From the back of his pickup truck, Ralph Austin dispenses the 50-pound blocks of salt that are so vital to his cattle. Austin uses about 1.5 tons a week, a small part of the nearly 2 million tons of salt fed to cattle each year. Because animals instinctively know they must have salt to survive and will never eat more than they need, ranchers will use it to ensure and regulate their cattle's intake of other minerals and proteins, which help maintain health and steady growth. Further, salt can be a labor-saving device. Animals will go wherever it is put. Thus, a rancher, by simply changing where salt blocks are placed, can ease the job of moving his cattle from pasture to pasture. When Ralph Austin was a boy, his father fed rock salt to his cattle. In the years since then, science has refined and broadened the role salt has to play in livestock nutrition. On ranches everywhere, there is little doubt about how vital it is. A mountain stream bursting downhill, sparkling, cold, crystal clear. But clear as it is, there is a good chance that its water is full of impurities, that in making contact with the earth, the water has picked up minerals that have made it hard. In much of Canada and many parts of the United States, these invisible minerals cause problems that must be faced daily, problems that plague cities like Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas. It has gambling, neon signs that turn night into day, and the kind of round-the-clock excitement that attracts people from all over the world. Las Vegas also has hard water. But the guests of the giant hotels that dot this city never bathe in it, never see its effects. For deep within these hotels, where guests never go, water softeners, using the same process found in private homes, take incoming hard water and treat it to remove hardness. Hardness which can destroy a plumbing system. Salt makes this process work. The results of this water softening may not be obvious to guests in plush hotels like Caesar's Palace, but without it, they would be complaining about dishes and silverware that are spotted, laundry that is gray, and porcelain surfaces that are stained. Without it, they would complain that their table, so elegantly set, does not sparkle. Without it, they would complain about soap that won't lather while bathing, and of hair that is dull, lusterless, and unmanageable after shampooing. Hard water, prevalent in countless cities and towns, is responsible for these difficulties and many others. Yet the rainwater that feeds rivers and streams is naturally soft. Where hardness robs this quality, salt, with its unique properties, can help restore it, making water soft again, just as it was when it started out, as rain. Henderson, Nevada, only 8 miles from Las Vegas, yet a world apart. Here, under rugged mountains, the magic of modern chemistry is at work daily, using salt in ways undreamed of generations ago. Quiet, rural. Henderson is home to a chemical plant that makes chlorine and caustic soda, both derived from salt, which is turned into a brine solution and put through a complex electrolysis procedure. By far the greatest use for salt is in the production of chemicals. Of these, chlorine, which is used to purify drinking water, and caustic soda are the most widely used. These chemicals, in turn, are used in the production of a whole spectrum of products, from soaps to paper, from detergents to plastics, from synthetic rubber to fabrics. Here at a textile plant in Lancaster, South Carolina, 78,000 pounds of salt a month is used in the dyeing of fabrics. Stu Beasley, the plant lab manager, understands the historic connection between textiles and salt.
Salt has been used for 300 years in the dyeing industry. Back when you were taking colorants from plants and trees to color fabrics, salt was used then to wet your bath out and get better yield from these colorants. Dyes have always been expensive, and nowadays salt is even more helpful in getting better yield from your colors. If we didn't use salt, we'd have a fabric that would have a wax papery look appearance, mealy as we call it in the dyeing industry.
Man has been harvesting and enjoying the bounty of the earth for years uncounted. Today, however, these riches, more often than not, are eaten long after they have been picked, long after they have been transported hundreds or thousands of miles to market. For many people, tomatoes and other vegetables do not come fresh. They come either frozen or in cans. Without salt, it would be difficult for the frozen food or canning industry to exist. For salt, often added in the form of quickly dissolving tablets, acts not only as a taste enhancer, but more importantly, as a preservative. The usefulness of salt with regard to food reaches back to the dawn of civilization, when man learned to cure meat, fish, and poultry with it. Pickles and olives are cured with salt. Meat packing requires it, as does the making of dairy products like butter and cheese. At a cheese cooperative in Marshfield, Wisconsin, over 110,000 pounds of cheddar cheese is made every day. Much of it will age for 8 or 9 months, yet none of it would be eaten if salt were not added to act as a preservative. Within a week, the cheese would be rancid and soft, totally inedible. But here again, salt is more than a preservative. It is added in specific amounts to heighten taste. In fact, of all the uses man has devised through the years for this mineral, one of the most remarkable is using salt as a taste enhancer. For salt, in just the right proportions, has the marvelous ability to develop, to bring to the surface, food's natural flavor. The brilliance of fall. Nowhere is it more striking than in Middlebury, Vermont. Yet for all its colorful beauty, autumn signals the approach of a special set of problems. Like most New England towns, Middlebury solves its winter problems in a traditional way, at a town meeting. Town manager David Crawford explains.
The final conclusion of the town meeting was that we should have a balanced use of salt and a reasonable use of salt. The town has real problems in that we are a hilly community. Our downtown has a real need for safe movement of people, and the use of salt meets that need.
Snow is commonplace in Middlebury, as it is in many cities and towns across Canada and the northern United States. Over 100 inches falls here during an average winter. The town's officials know that salt, which melts snow, keeps it plowable and prevents snow, and in this case ice, from sticking to pavement surfaces, is the best way to clear streets and roads. In the yearly winter battle to provide safety and mobility on thoroughfares, salt, in addition to the snowplow, is a frontline weapon. Nothing else works as well. Other chemicals are too expensive. Sand and cinders offer only temporary traction, require costly cleanup, and cannot melt snow and ice. In fact, salt offers the only real solution in making roads safe in winter.
Okay, who's got the end?
He's got one in and I got the other one on my knees.
It has been estimated that salt has some 14,000 uses. Of these, none is more important than its use with regard to human well-being.
Get that side. Dave, get that side. No, you get it.
The clear liquid so often being administered intravenously by rescue squads at the scene of an accident is, in fact, a saline solution. For years, it has been used in the management of blood loss caused by shock or hemorrhage.
Let's go. Quick. Got it.
Because salt and water make up so much of the blood, this solution can briefly restore blood volume and save lives. But its use is not limited to accidents. In the intensive care units of hospitals everywhere, saline solutions are vitally important. Dr. Frank Colella, head of critical care at Prince George's General Hospital, Cheverly, Maryland.
In the intensive care unit, we use saline solutions on nearly every patient to maintain the normal composition of body electrolytes. Salt is made of sodium and chloride, and both of those constituents are found in the blood. And when patients are totally dependent on intravenous calories and fluids, we need to maintain the same concentrations in their blood as normal, and we do that through the use of salt solutions.
And in the operating room, salt solutions keep patients from going into shock during their ordeal. In fact, the simple addition of iodide to table salt has practically eliminated iodine deficiency goiters in the United States and Canada. That salt and our health are so closely intertwined is natural, for each of us has about 7 ounces of it dissolved in our systems. It regulates the exchange of water between body cells and their surrounding fluid, moving food in and waste out. It provides the sodium that is a component of tears, saliva, mother's milk, and is an essential part of the digestive fluid in our stomachs. Without salt, without the numerous, intricate functions it carries out in our bodies, we would die. The miracle of birth. After 9 months, a child is thrust from the protection of the saline solution of its embryonic sac. Within this child, not yet 1 minute old, as within each of us, there flows an internal sea. Its saltiness reminiscent of the primeval oceans that mothered all life, an eternal reminder of a distant human heritage. The salt constantly produced by the descendants of those oceans is as salt has always been, a simple substance taken for granted. Yet internally, externally, salt is an absolutely necessary part of our lives. We cannot live without it.
Oh, yeah. So don't regulate my industry to make me not add so much salt to food. Yeah. Really fascinating. I love watching films like this that are for a very specific lobbying group or organization who are trying to release information that is counter to what is happening as far as legislation. And so this is a wonderful promotional piece that talks about how great salt is for you and all of us. So, yes, and I wish there was a Pepper Institute, but I don't think pepper was ever regulated. But there are lots of examples of this, especially older films, where boy. Your comments are hilarious. Rick K said we just assaulted. Yes, you were. You were assaulted. So thanks for tuning in. If you like what you saw, you can hit the thumbs up. You can donate via the super thanks. You can go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks, and those are ways to send us some cash so we can buy some shelving units. I'm thinking about some shelving units, and they're not cheap. So I'm trying to come up with a way to do that, because there's a big move in our future where we're going to be moving stuff off-site temporarily, and so that is one of the things that cash will go to pay. So thank you. Yeah, join us tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. Oh boy. Everybody take care, and we will see you soon.